Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you share and really pull out the key takeaways. Today we're looking at a pretty interesting YouTube video. It's from GHEKD Talks called Expert Tips and Tricks for Selling Dubai Real Estate with Dr. Anand.
Right. And it sounds specific, Dubai real estate.
It does. But our mission here is broader. We want to find those actionable bits about communication, understanding people, market dynamics, things you can probably use elsewhere too.
Absolutely. The video itself, it's got a good mix of voices. There's Dr. Anand, who they call a real estate guru.
Okay.
Lay, the host. Then T, who's a successful realtor there, crediting Dr. Anand. And also Nick, who's newer, coming from the Netherlands, gives a different angle.
Got it. So quite a few perspectives. Okay, let's jump in. One of the first things, and it really stood out, was Dr. Anand saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, that quote really sets the stage, doesn't it? He uses it to draw a line between just, pushing for a deal and building real, sustained success.
How so? What's the core difference there?
It boils down to genuine intent, that sort of underlying why. Are you there just for the transaction, or are you actually trying to help the person? That intent, he argues, builds trust. Makes people want to listen.
Right. Connection before the pitch almost.
Exactly. And T, the realtor, she shared the story about a client.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, who basically chose her not because of the property specifics, but because they felt she genuinely cared about them. That feeling was the deciding factor.
Wow. That's powerful. The property became secondary.
It really highlights the point. And Dr. Anand adds this other layer. He suggests that as people achieve more, their intent often becomes, purer, more obvious to others.
Huh? Like success clarifies the motive or maybe refines it?
Something like that. Maybe the initial scramble for personal gain evolves into something more value-driven. It becomes palpable.
So it's this cycle. Care leads to success. Success makes the care more evident. It does make you reflect on your own interactions, professionally or even personally.
It definitely does. And this idea of intent connects directly to how we communicate effectively, which they get into next. Dr. Anand talks about bypassing critical filters.
Critical filters, like mental roadblocks.
Yeah, exactly. Our sort of built-in skepticism shields based on past experiences, biases, they make us question new stuff automatically.
Okay, those defenses we all have up.
Precisely. And he contrasts that with the subconscious mind, which he says is much more open. It doesn't really differentiate between imagination and reality in the same critical way.
So the idea is, to talk directly to the subconscious?
Kind of. It's more about understanding those conscious filters and finding ways to gently plant ideas deeper, especially if you're trying to help someone see things from a new angle, overcome their existing frames of reference.
So it's less about manipulation and more about making someone receptive.
That's the frame, getting them to want to listen because they sense your genuine interest in them. That naturally lowers the defenses.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this flows nicely into a discussion about skill versus trickery. He uses a magician analogy.
Right, what looks like magic is actually just highly practiced skill.
Exactly. And he says using things like metaphors and stories and communication works in a similar way.
How so?
They tend to sneak past those conscious, critical filters. They sort of put the listener into a more receptive state, almost like a light trance.
I get that. Like when you're lost in a movie or a good book.
Yeah.
You suspend disbelief.
Totally. And he connects it back to childhood, when we were much more open to fantastical ideas. And even further back to human evolution, sitting around fires, sharing stories. It's baked into us.
So leveraging that deep-seated human response.
It explains why we can accept wild stories in a cinema, but would question someone telling us the same thing on the street. Context and delivery matter.
So the takeaway for communication is package your ideas in stories if you want them to land.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Make it engaging, make it relatable.
Okay, interesting. Then they move on to something called the 3 yeses technique. This one sounds a bit more deliberate.
It does, yeah, and it could sound manipulative on the surface.
But how do they explain it?
It's based on psychology, how our brains like patterns and respond to positive affirmation.
Okay.
The idea is you ask 3 questions in a row where the answer is almost guaranteed to be yes.
Right. Like, do you want a good return? Do you want to minimize risk? Things an investor would obviously agree with.
Exactly. And because you've established this yes pattern, the theory is the subconscious gets primed to say yes to the 4th question, which might be closer to the actual proposal.
Needs careful handling, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They stress this point. It only really works ethically and effectively if it's backed by genuine intent and, crucially, a good product or service. You're guiding, not tricking.
And things like your tone of voice, even nodding, can reinforce that positive feeling.
Yeah, the nonverbals play a huge role in making it feel natural and building momentum.
Okay, so we've got intent, bypassing filters, storytelling, the 3 S's. What's next? The conversation seemed to shift towards personality types.
It did. Towards understanding right brain versus left brain dominant people. And this is super practical, applicable way beyond just sales.
Right, adapting how you talk to who you're talking to. How do you spot the difference quickly?
They give some quick tells. Right brain folks often lean towards the subjective, maybe use vaguer language, longer sentences. They're often more expressive, focused on feelings, relationships. Think keywords like fluid, natural, inspire, collaborate.
And left brain types.
More logical, sequential, structured. They like details, data, efficiency. Keywords might be outcome, process, structure, results, control.
So the key is mirroring.
Essentially, yeah. Adapting your style to match theirs builds rapport almost instantly. People feel comfortable with people who communicate like they do.
So if you're talking to a very logical challenger type, as they put it.
Exactly, you'd be direct. Maybe mention the time limit for the meeting up front, like T did in her example. Shows respect for their efficiency. Focus on facts, data, outcomes. Less fluff.
It's all about building that comfort, that rapport, making them feel understood.
Precisely. They briefly mention whole brain people, too. Those who can switch easily between styles. But note they're relatively rare, maybe 4% or so.
But the main point is recognizing these tendencies in anyone, colleagues, clients, even family, can make interactions much smoother.
Definitely. It's a fundamental communication skill.
Okay, so now tying this back to the specific context. Dubai real estate. Nick, the realtor from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
What were his main observations about the differences?
Well, a big one was the market focus. He said in Europe, especially the Netherlands, it's mostly about selling existing, ready homes.
Standard resale market.
Right. Whereas Dubai is heavily driven by off-plan sales, selling properties that aren't built yet.
Ah, okay, that requires a totally different approach, right? Selling a vision, a promise.
Exactly. Building trust is even more critical. You're asking investors to buy into something they can't physically see or touch yet.
He also mentioned something about sales training. Maybe less depth in Dubai compared to Europe.
He floated that idea, yeah. An interesting comparison. And they also touched on how things are changing in Europe. New regulations, like point systems for rentals, are apparently squeezing investment returns, making people look elsewhere.
Which brings us to Dr. Anand's view on Europe's economy.
Yeah, he seemed cautiously optimistic, but stressed the need for a big shift in leadership thinking, facing realities. He also talked about global trends, people moving for quality of life, safety, economic opportunity.
And Dubai being a major beneficiary of that.
Definitely. They mentioned the significant number of millionaires projected to move to the UAE and Singapore. It underlines this shift.
And Dubai seems quite proactive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Appointing chief AI officers in government?
Yeah.
That sends a message.
It signals they're really focused on the future, yeah.
So for brokers coming from Europe, maybe like Nick, what's the core advice Dr. Anand gives for succeeding in Dubai?
First, recognize it's a different beast. That off-plan focus requires building a unique kind of investor comfort. Second, be careful who you listen to when you first arrive. Look for mentors with genuine intent, not just those focused on quick money.
Focus on the client experience.
Exactly. And third, really understand the market dynamics, the global context. Dubai's vision, its performance, like its GDP growth being way above the world average.
You have to sell the city, the vision, before you sell the specific apartment.
That's his point. You need that broader conviction. He also acknowledged that some European investors, and maybe agents too, can be a bit stubborn, resistant to this different market.
Which leads right into the next bit. How do you actually convince those European investors to consider Dubai?
The main lever seems to be the numbers, showing the potential for much higher returns than they're likely seeing back home, often with lower costs involved too.
They use that comparison of luxury property prices, right?
Yeah.
Dubai versus London, New York.
Yeah, really stark comparisons, showing you get, brand new infrastructure, a city with a bright future for a fraction of the price of older established hubs. It's a compelling value argument.
But what about the non-financial concerns? The comfort zone issue?
Dr. Anand suggests tackling that head-on. Ask directly. What are your specific reasons for not investing in Dubai?
Get the objections out in the open.
And then there's a technique for handling those objections. Acknowledge it. Okay, I understand you feel there's a lack of culture, but then immediately ask, is that the only thing stopping you?
Trying to isolate the real core issue versus superficial complaints.
Exactly. It prints deeper. Maybe the lack of culture comment is masking a different fear or uncertainty.
And for perceptions like it being too crowded or lacking culture, he suggested reframing it.
Yeah, pivot to an investor's perspective. Okay, maybe parts are crowded, but what does that mean? High demand, strong rental yields. Focus on the metrics that matter for an investment.
Use the facts and figures, population growth, economic performance to counter opinions.
Precisely. Numbers tend to cut through subjective feelings when you're talking investment potential. Dubai's growth story provides plenty of ammo there.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground there.
We really have, from the foundational importance of genuine intent.
Right, the care factor.
To understanding communication styles like right brain versus left brain.
And adapting to build rapport.
Then those subtle psychological approaches like storytelling or the 3 S's, used ethically, of course. And finally, digging into the unique dynamics of the Dubai market, the off-plan focus, the global appeal, and how to present its compelling investment case, especially to those used to different markets.
And like we said up front, even though the example is Dubai real estate, these principles about intent, communication, psychology, market understanding, they really resonate much more broadly, don't they?
Absolutely. They're fundamentally about human interaction and influence.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about that balance of intent and technique in your own world.
Yeah.
Are you leading with genuine care? Are you then being thoughtful about how you communicate, adapting your approach?
And consider what critical filters might be shaping your own perceptions when you encounter new ideas or opportunities. Are you quick to dismiss things, or are you open to reframing?
Also, maybe just notice the right brain, left brain thing in your daily interactions. Could mirroring someone's style smooth things out a bit? Lots to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully this deep dive gave you some valuable, maybe even surprising insights. If you've got questions or ideas for other sources we should tackle, do let us know. Thanks for joining us.